I'm Park Howell, and welcome to the Business of Story, where I consult, teach, coach, and speak on the applied science and bewitchery of brand and business storytelling, so that you can clarify your story to amplify your impact and simplify your life.
I thought it was just a stupid picture of a pig in the ocean. But after hearing that story, I had to have it. Now I wasn't just buying a picture. I was buying a story. Story literally made the picture worth more money to me.
That's what businesses are about. People buy brands. People buy stories much more than anything else.
I work with a lot of big enterprise companies, but let's just say I always tell folks, drop the PowerPoint, close your laptops, start with your story.
If you want people to get engaged and you want people to act, you have to tell them an emotionally powerful story. That's with great characters, it's with uncertain outcomes, and it's with high stakes and drama.
All business strategy is a story.
Welcome back to the Business of Story. Park Howell here for you, and I am sitting in the office of one of the most interesting men in the world, quite frankly. His name is Rex Mon. He is the owner of Forever Living Products International, multi-billion-dollar, multinational, and the largest grower, manufacturer, and distributor of aloe vera-based health and beauty products. And they're located right here in Scottsdale, Arizona. And nope, you're not going to hear from Rex today. He's out and about, probably around the world somewhere. But we have their head of marketing. I guess I'm going to have to ask him what his official title. Nick, what is your official title?
Well,
because it just changed, I know.
It did, right? So officially, I'm Vice President of Communications, which effectively encompasses marketing, events, and PR.
Okay, so we are foreshadowing the introduction of Nick Woodward-Shaw, who is joining us today because of the amazing storytelling that Forever Living Products has done over 40 years and has celebrated that grand anniversary just this past spring in South Fork, Texas, where they happen to own South Fork Ranch in Texas. A little side story there. But Forever Living Products is near and dear to my heart because when I started my agency, Park & Company, back in 1995, Forever Living Products was my very first client. And I got to work with amazing people, Navaz Goswala, kind of the right arm of Rex Mon, Greg Mon, his son, Aiden O'Hare, and this terrific group of this very family-oriented, family-run business that literally started from a garage. It is the garage story startup business in the direct sales network marketing world. And Rex Mon kind of single-handedly with his company introduced the power of aloe vera to North America and the rest of the world. Well, I had the opportunity then of working with Forever for about, 14 years. They were just a terrific client and have been working with them now again in the last few years. Amazing loyalty, amazing product, amazing people. And the reason why I wanted to bring Nick on today is this incredible book that they put together that to me is what story marketing is all about. Not only did they capture in these 40 stories the 40 years of Forever Living Products, but it's not like a sales piece at all. It's like an anthology, kind of a National Geographic of where this company has been, starting here in Arizona and reaching out to 140 or 150 countries now, and all of the incredible people that have been involved in this journey. So, with that, for you listeners today, I want you to settle in and be exposed to how you do story marketing really, really well, and especially when you are reaching out to the universe, literally to people that speak 10, 15 different languages, but how all of these stories resonate in their own way. So with us today, Nick Woodward-Shaw, thank you so much for being here on the Business of Story.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Park.
Yeah, now, judging by your accent, you are not from Scottsdale, Arizona.
No. Tucson. I'm kidding.
Of course. I should have picked up on that.
I'm from England, actually. I've actually worked with Forever for almost 20 years now. Started out organising their events in the UK, and then that spread and spread. I'm from the north of England, near to Manchester is my home. Lived there all my life, except 3 years in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong was the reason that I got into events and marketing. And then, let me think.
Well, what happened in Hong Kong that got you into events and marketing? And is this pre-Forever Living Products?
It is a long way pre, yeah. So I studied engineering degree at Manchester University. Did a great job, got second-class honours and studied it for 4 years. And when I finished, all I realised is I didn't want to pursue engineering as a career.
Now, I got to ask, were you initially pursuing it because somebody else wanted you to live that story, or what?
Exactly. So I'm approaching 50 years old. So back in high school time in the day, my passion was music and design. But the head teacher at the time recognized my abilities in maths and sciences and basically told me, no, Nick, you're not pursuing you're not pursuing music and design. You're a smart kid. We want you to pursue maths and sciences.
So they wanted you to go from your right brain emotional side, which where your passion laid.
Right.
And jump into the left logical side because you were sharp.
Exactly.
All right.
So being the good, well-behaved boy that I was brought up to be, I just said, okay. And you didn't really, in those days, you didn't question your teacher, particularly. The engineering was what I pursued. The moment I got to have some sort of control in that, as in I'd got my degree and it was now my decision to go out into the world and pursue that engineering job, I decided I need to put this off because I didn't feel like it was for me. I'd saved up a little bit of money, I borrowed some from my parents, and I just bought a plane ticket. As it happened,
a plane ticket to Hong Kong.
No, it was more than that. It was a 6-month round the world ticket. So I landed in LA. That was the first stop, and wandered to Mexico. Then I actually came to Arizona. So that was in.
And you thought, God, it's hot here.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You think I'd have learned, and now I'm back here, 20-some years later. After the US, Mexico, China, Thailand, then ended up in Hong Kong. And I guess I should point out the point of the travel at the time was not to travel. The point was to put off making a decision about a job.
Ultimately procrastinating as you were traveling the globe.
It was brilliant procrastinating.
That's smart.
And this, I guess the story goes, I was in Hong Kong. I ran out of money, completely ran out of money. Like I didn't know where I was going to sleep that night.
That's called an inciting incident. Go ahead.
Okay. And I went into a bar and basically said, can I get a job? I need some money. I'll start work now if you wish. And while I was waiting for the interview, there was 2 English guys in this bar chatting, and I overheard a conversation where basically they were looking for some event staff. I hadn't thought about whether I wanted to be involved in events. It was just a job, and it was just a means to getting some money to live. And I overheard this and said, hey, yeah, I'd be interested in that. I'll help. I'll work all day long. And they said, okay. And there we were. One of the first jobs I did was working on a Bon Jovi show. And I kind of thought, this is really cool.
And what did you do?
Follow spot. So I didn't really know what a follow spot was, but I was up in the truss for Richie, the guitarist, with the spotlight. Somebody was talking in my ear saying, turn it on now, turn it off now. And I thought this was kind of cool that I was very much a production assistant, lowly role. I fetched and carried, I made tea, emptied trucks in the humidity of Hong Kong. And for some reason, I absolutely loved it. And I knew it was for me. Yeah.
You know, and that kind of underscores the theme of today's show, the power of moments in our stories. So here you are, you run out of money, you're at a bar, willing to do anything, almost anything at a bar. You overhear someone in the event world and you say, hey, I could do that for you, and how it totally pivoted and changed your life.
Completely.
You know, one of the reasons why I'm here with you today on our microphones for Business of Story is because of Forever Living Products. And I can tell you the exact moment. So, you know, I started my ad agency in 1995 and I ran it till 2015, 16, and I pivoted away from the traditional advertising model, primarily because of Forever Living Products. And it's not just because you were our first client, and at the time we weren't doing as much work with you, but Forever gave me an opportunity in 2011 to take the stage at your international super rally. There was about 4,000 distributors in attendance, and they allowed me to do my very first ever storytelling training.
That's awesome.
And talk about a warm audience, because I had a client, thank goodness, that loved me. So they weren't going to throw me out even if I did bomb. I knew a lot of the folks in the crowd, so that helped me. I was scared, as scared could be, taking that stage. But once I got going and then had some familiar faces join me on stage and do some other things, I was hooked. And it was that moment, that rally in 2011 in Washington, D.C., in front of all those distributors, that's when I knew I needed to pivot away from my traditional agency business model and get into what I do today. And that is the power of the story. And I'm way more happy now than running an ad agency, but to go around, consult, teach, coach, and speak on story. And I've seen the amazing work that you've done with Forever, both when you were working as a freelancer and then in Europe, and then came over here and took over the whole thing, like in Abu Dhabi.
Right.
Tell the story for our listeners.
I have to correct you, it was Dubai.
Oh, Dubai. Dubai. It is Dubai. But the visual of what you pulled off in Dubai was remarkable.
Thank you. Well, I guess I should mention, I feel like I'm so blessed. I'm in the dream job. If I could design a job that's for me, I'm in it. So, and I'm particularly thankful to Rex that you mentioned earlier and his son Greg, because they give me the freedom and the trust, I think most importantly, to pursue the creativity, pursue the ideas and create, we call them experiences like no other for our people. But to your point, yes, I was in Dubai. We decided, it was about 3 years ago now, that we were going to do what we call our global rally, our big annual flagship event. We'd picked out Dubai. I was over there doing a site visit, site inspection, looking at the hotels, venues, meeting with potential vendors to vet them. And I was put in a hotel on Jumeirah Beach, and one of the stunning buildings, probably the most stunning building, certainly in Dubai, possibly in the world, is called the Burj Al Arab. And people talk about it being a 7-star hotel. I'm not sure that's strictly true, but I know the suites start at $15,000 a night, and they only have suites.
And is that the one that looks like a sailboat?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. A stunning, stunning building. And one of my passions is photography outside of work. And there was something magical about this building. You have to look at it, something attractive in the architecture. So every morning and every evening, I would, at sunrise or sunset, I would go out there, I'd sit on the beach with my camera and just look at it. And I was taking some pictures, trying to get the sun going down or some different colors going on. I was in my element. And then this one particular picture I took, the sun reflected off the fascia, the glass fascia of this building, straight down my camera, straight down the lens. So there was a flare that appeared on the picture that wasn't designed in. That was nature doing
not a
its thing.
filter, not an Instagram.
No.
Okay.
And it wasn't something that I'd thought, I'll capture this moment. It was just a power of moment. It happened. And at first I thought, oh, the flare will have killed that picture. But actually it made it. And I couldn't get this picture out of my head. I'd processed it, and these pictures are just for my own amusement generally. And something about that picture, I kept going back to it, kept looking at it. And then I was thinking, somehow if the sun can do that off the front of this building, perhaps we can project something to almost mimic that moment onto the front of the building to wow our crowd that one particular event will be on the beach right in front of that.
And how many people were there?
At the event, we had around 2,000 people at that one.
These are your top distributors, top salespeople from around the world.
Yeah. The event, in its total event, had 12,000 people attending, which we came together at the end of the week for a couple of days, but that was a high-level one on the beach. And so it planted a kind of vision in my mind, I guess, that maybe we can project our logo, our symbol or our text onto the building. So that got me going down a road. And one thing I've learned over the years, and particularly from Rex, is if you have something in mind, stick to it. If something's eating at you, don't let go of it very easily. So persistence kicked in. I approached the hotel, which interestingly we were renting no rooms from, so they had no reason
seriously
to talk to me.
So they weren't even invested in this.
No. And they sent me packing. They said, great idea, Nick, but no way. I asked them 2 or 3 times, kept getting the same answer. We'd started to build a relationship with the government there because obviously a big group of people coming in. We discussed the logistics with the authorities, the police. They know of our attendance. So I spoke to a couple of colleagues there and they said, oh, no, it's a cool idea once again, but I don't think it's going to work. I kept getting knocked back. And every time I went back to visit, I'd find somebody else to talk to.
Now, is it worth inserting at this point, if I have the story right, that you told nobody
at the office
about this? So Rex Mon, Greg Mon, Aidan O'Hare,
correct,
Vasquez Walla, nobody knew about you.
Exactly. And part of that was a little bit of self-preservation because there was a very good chance I'd fail. And if nobody knew about the fail, no harm done. So, yeah, I kept it to myself. And it was over a number of months. But eventually I got to somebody's boss's boss. And in a meeting with them, I actually literally got down on my knees and begged them. I said, this is such a cool idea. Not just for us, but I think it's just going to be a spectacle that, maybe people will want to repeat. And eventually they kind of said, man, you're persistent. If we try and arrange it, will you back off?
Just to get rid of you, they had to let you do it.
I think so. Maybe I was becoming a pest, but it seems with an English accent you can get away with it.
Yeah, a little bit better than I think I could.
So, a very long story short, eventually we got permission to do it. Obviously, then there was the process of, well, how do we make this happen? Because the fascia of the building, it's reflective, of course, but there's an architectural shape to it, curves in multi-directions. So the focus point for a projector at the base would be different to the focus point at the top. But through some very clever people that I know and persuaded and sweet talked, we managed to work that out. And the initial plan that they would let us project our logo on there for, I think it was 2 minutes, which I was very, very excited about, but kind of thought it'd be nice if we could get a bit more. So I didn't give up, kept pursuing. We got to agree to 10 minutes. We actually ended up with 30 minutes. They originally said one single logo, and we managed to persuade them to do video. So we actually projected animated numbers, animated figures, and fireworks in the end.
So what happened when you had everybody out there? And take us to the moment when it was go time and you didn't know if it was going to work or not. And there you had all your bosses and you had the whole world of Forever looking upon you.
Well, thankfully, I was able to do a test the previous night at 3 a.m.
Oh, my God. While everyone's hopefully asleep.
Everyone hopefully was asleep, yeah. And we managed to do a projection test at that time. It wasn't the full test because literally we didn't want people reporting on it. At that time, I understand that no projection had been done on that building. So it could have been a media moment maybe. So we did a quick test. I knew that the technology worked, but we wanted to sync it with music. So we were approaching the moment where we were going to reveal this. And I was side of stage with Greg, our president, and he was introducing the moment. And the moment was about 1,000 of our guests in that group on the beach that were going to open bonus checks for their 12 months of work. So it was roughly $6 million we were presenting that night. So each of these winners had a large envelope, a tube, if you will, that they'd kept over their shoulders, they'd not peeped, and then this moment was to build up to them revealing their checks to themselves. I queued up Greg. He was going out on stage and doing the countdown. And I said to Greg, before you get to the moment, make sure you say, let's take a look at the countdown. And he said to me, but Nick, we don't have any screens. Normally we'll do it with just music. I said, there is a big screen. Just go out and do it. Say it. So I gave him the script. And when the moment came and he said, okay, let's look at the countdown, the projection kicked in. It synced with the music. And his word down the microphone was, no freaking way. So what was great, it was a cool moment for him as well. And
that's what really your whole career has been about, is designing those moments, those extra special moments that touch people and move them and actually even, connect with their neurotransmitters, and they love them. They fall in love with those moments. And that's, you will do, and I've seen you in action go to no ends. And you just demonstrated that, to design and produce a moment like that. I
think, I don't know where it comes from, but the passion I have for that, and also I'm part of a very big team of much cleverer people than me. So they would argue that I have the daft ideas, and then they make the reality happen. So it is, there was probably 25 people involved in creating that moment. But there's something I believe really, really powerful about the live environment, and it happens at concerts. It's happened to me with many artists. U2, those guys, create moments that touch you. It's not just, you're not just listening to a song, but something connects and it generates serotonin. It gets the brain buzzing, gets a hype. You get tears in your eyes. And for me, that's the goal of particularly our global rally, is throughout the week, find a few moments through that week that will stick with somebody, and hopefully maybe get a better connection with us as an organization, or just inspire or motivate them to do that little bit more, because I have to be at this event next year. Maybe it'll make a little difference in their lives. That's our hope.
And moments aren't just for events, are they?
absolutely.
I mean, there can be for sales trainings, they can be presentations, they can be in marketing. They could be a website moment. They could be a moment on our podcast, which I try to shoot for. I mean, you've already given us a couple nice ones. I mean, I have a feeling our listeners were right alongside you in Dubai watching that whole thing come to play. And in fact, you've got a video of it. We'll put it in the show notes so people can go and see it in action.
Cool.
How else do you design moments into helping this brand reach around the world? And the universality of story. That's the one thing that I experienced for the very, very first time, that moment when I took the stage and worked with them, where it was, again, 2011, we were translating, I think, in 10 languages, real time from the stage.
Yeah.
And it was being broadcast, webcast. So, talking about a coming out party, I loved it. But it occurred to me at the time, and no one left. I mean, we had them there for like 2 hours for this training, how universal story was. Right. And story is that everybody gets it. Everybody understands the hero's journey, the template, whether they recognize it or realize that it even exists. We all sort of gravitate to these frameworks. And I have learned then, since then, in the last many years of teaching this, that it's not necessarily about the story, but to find your scenes, to design the scenes, knit your scenes together, find your scenes, and your story will find you. So how are you using moments to help tell the forever story in other aspects of your work?
Well, I guess we have the advantage, and again, I keep going back to Rex, but Rex created this company, and obviously we sell product, we make money, we have to, in order to exist. But Rex actually set out to make a difference, and you know Rex as well as I do, and he's a man that he doesn't want to give you a fish. He wants to teach you how to fish so that you can help yourself and pass that on. So we have a really rich history, 40 years of Rex creating or telling these stories and creating the environment, which is the company and the opportunity that we have. And so we have a lot to pull on. In terms of the events, we hark back to our history an awful lot, and we celebrate the achievements of our salespeople. And because we're in 150 plus countries, those stories are very diverse. They come sometimes from struggle, philanthropy, hope, selflessness. That's more accurate. I'm really lucky, and we have a very, very diverse and rich pond to fish in, if you like.
Mm-hmm. And so you called about a year and a half ago, reached out to me, and I haven't been over here in about a year or so. And I was really honored when you asked me about helping pull together this book of 40 stories in 40 years. And I know a couple years prior to that, you and I were in cahoots a little bit about telling Rex's story because it is so remarkable. But we didn't have a lot of luck there. So how did that then cascade into this book that you did produce?
Okay. Well, Rex is as modest a person as I've ever come across, and the success that he's had and the difference that he's made in literally millions of people's lives is remarkable. But his humility knows no bounds. So as we knew the 40th anniversary was coming up, I spoke to him, and we chatted on a number of occasions about maybe doing a book about his life, his story. But he was born and brought up in Idaho, and pretty much a self-made man, and so many wonderful stories as part of that. His humility meant that he didn't want the attention. He was like, why does people want to know my story? It's about them, and that's what he kept going back to. They're the ones that have achieved these things that make me look good, and there's more to it than that, as you know. So he was pretty much against having the focus on himself. So we thought, well, let's do a book anyway. Let's make it about him or inspired by him, so it's still recognizing his achievements, but through other people, if you like. So that's how we got to
let
to
them
this
tell his story from their point of view and the impact he's had on their lives.
Exactly. And at the time that, again, maybe another one of these moments, at the time that we kind of started to accept the fact that he wasn't comfortable with a book about himself, I had one of our leaders from Japan come into my office, and he knew nothing about our plans for stories or recognition of the 40th birthday, but just happened to say, hey, you might like this, and told me one of the stories that's in this book that basically then started us down this road. Shall I go into that?
I think you should.
It's pretty incredible.
You've teed it up.
I guess. So back in 2016, I believe, in Kumamoto in Japan, there was an earthquake. Maybe you remember it, and hundreds of people sadly died, lost their lives, and vast areas were flattened by the power of the earthquake. And we have an office in that part of Japan, and we had our country manager responsible for the operation over there went up a couple of months after that disaster. Thankfully, nobody from our organization was hurt, although many people lost their homes and their livelihoods at the time. And our country manager was visiting our people up there. And as he was going around the area, checking that everybody's okay, and this is a couple of months after the earthquake had happened, people kept mentioning, hey, I must thank Suzuki-san. He was wonderful in taking care of us and looking after us. And he heard this name several times. Our country manager didn't know this guy, but it was a member of our staff up there. So a pretty junior guy. And we kept hearing this name. When he looked into it a little bit deeper, it turned out our office was closed when the earthquake happened because it was unsafe. He'd gone home, and the first earthquake happened. His house was okay, and his son said to him, his 6-year-old son said to him, "We're okay, Dad, but what about other people who aren't?" And that really touched Suzuki-san's heart. And he made a decision that I'm going to go out and find the forever people up there, make sure they're okay, make sure they've got what they need. And he did that for several weeks. Didn't talk to upper management, didn't ask for permission, just took it upon himself to do the right thing. And he took products to people, he fetched provisions, he sourced electricians or plumbers if they needed them, just was a very good citizen. Didn't make any fuss about it. The phenomenal thing is, I mean, that's a great story on its own, the ends he went to. When our country manager spoke to him, Suzuki-san, and said, it's incredible what you've done for these people, and we're really, you've represented the company really well. I want to thank you. I want to give you the kudos that you deserved. And he said, I'm just really happy that your house and your family were okay. It turns out in the second earthquake, his house had been severely damaged. And for 2 months, he'd been living in his Toyota Prius with his wife and 2 kids. But his goal was to look after others, and he'd sort himself out later. Wow. And that touched me hugely. In fact, when he told me the story, I had tears in my eyes. And this is a very junior member of our staff that even his boss's boss didn't know him. And I thought, this has to be told. It's a brilliant story. And when we first spoke to Suzuki-san about the great thing that he did, he actually said, I just wanted to do what Rex would do. And he'd never met Rex. And that connection to me was hugely, hugely powerful.
He had never met Rex, but Rex had that kind of impact on him.
Right.
He'd heard the stories of Rex. He'd seen him in action.
Exactly.
Yeah, I imagine he's been at rallies, so he saw Rex on stage with 1,000 of admirers and salespeople, distributors in the crowd.
Yeah.
And yet he had that kind of impact.
So exactly. So that was the story, along with Rex's reticence, I guess, to do a book on himself. That the two things came together, and then I thought, I need to pick up the phone to Park.
And I'm so glad you did. I had so much fun with this. First, just strategizing with you. I knew a lot of stories, too, having worked with the company for a long, long time, and all these news stories that were starting to surface. We also brought in a really terrific writer, Michael Zeman, who had the time and the tenacity to do the interviews with people around the world in the middle of the night, and sometimes had to get your country managers involved so that they could translate it, because the people whose stories you were telling could not speak English, and Michael certainly couldn't speak their language. And so it was pretty amazing how you all pulled all that together.
Michael did an absolutely stunning job, and he completely immersed himself in it, and some of the headlines and his writing style was brilliant. So thanks, Michael. In fact, I have to mention, I think my favorite line of his, it's the first line of one of our people who's in India. And if I say this line, tell me if you could resist reading further. The opening line is, even a stray cat eats better than Sunil Gupta. How could you not read on?
That's Michael. By the way, Michael is also an improv artist, so he has ways of accessing these really bizarre quadrants of his mind, and very, very smart, very, very great writer. these stories then came together. I kind of stepped back. We worked on a framework and a format for these stories, and I think it's worth our listeners hearing. And it's actually some insights I learned from my colleagues down at Anecdote in Melbourne, Australia. And they have a wonderful program called Storytelling for Leaders and Storytelling for Sales, of which I also teach. Those programs are primarily about oral-based storytelling. And the one thing, many things I love about their program, but the one thing that really caught me was these 5 elements of story: a time stamp, a location stamp, a character, center of the story, action, something has to take place, a surprise in that action that then, when it all comes together, it leads to a business point, or it leads to the theme, be it persistence, and you demonstrated this earlier today, the story on persistence, getting through the Dubai thing and everything that's going on, the surprises that happen throughout. So we gave Michael that chore. Everybody had their own unique story, but to bring some semblance of order and to make sure it was told as an event-based story versus just a retelling of high-level facts, you got them to think of that area. So folks, when you're doing this for yourself and you're thinking about storytelling, timestamp, when did this happen? Location stamp, where did this happen? When you start with those 2 things, our brains happen to lean in because they say, Nick's telling me a story. A character. And of course, you want to have that character. It could be you, it could be someone else, but what you want to be thinking about is, how will my audience relate to whoever is the character in the story? That's what helps you to, the theme and the character, and decide on what to tell. And then the action takes place. Mm-hmm. And then the story you just told. So he survives his house survives the first earthquake. The surprise is, there's a second earthquake. It gets, torn apart. Uh-huh. The next surprise is he's living out of his Prius with his kids. The next surprise is he still is putting other people first. And the final is that because I'm modeling what Rex would do. So that is the power of the story. And this book, 40 Stories of Forever, is filled with these same kinds of stories. What was one of your favorite that came out of this and maybe surprised you in the book?
I think what we wanted to do, obviously, there's in our organization, we have lots of stories of success, and it's easy to tell, not necessarily easy, but you don't want to fill it with rags to riches. So I love the scope and the spread of the story. So some of them were just fun. One of them's a love story. Simple. Some of them are about philanthropies where somebody contributes a good amount of their income to change a village life in Malawi, for example. But probably if I was to pick one that I really loved, and it's a little bit whimsical, is that, and it's one of our friends from Canada called Oliver Lepke, and he's worked really hard in our business. He's brought himself a good residual income by distributing the Aloe Vera products, and he got to a point where his business was ticking over nicely, had good people in his team, and he decided, I'm going to go and travel. And I think it was for 6 months. Forgive me if it was longer. And he traveled with his kids and just took off around the world. And Forever gave him the opportunity to do that. But as he traveled, he took photographs of clocks. And so this became the theme of his travels, and we were following him on social media. And he'd post a clock in Vienna, and then a clock in Budapest, and then a clock in the Philippines. And I think he went to a whole number of countries with his young family. And I constantly think back to maybe the difference that will make to his kids, and the ability that Forever has given him to take that on, hopefully will have a lasting effect. And it's just a feel-good, lovely story. I like it.
Well, it's a metaphor of time, of getting your time back and taking time with your family to go and travel the world.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
But there's so many others.
One of my favorite ones, you and I had a chance to go and interview Ruth Mott, Rex's wife, who's been with him every step of the way.
And she's the real boss. We know this.
Well, yeah. But what I loved about it, all the different stories, was the one she told, to me anyways, takes this moment back to probably the very beginning of Forever, even though it may not have come, the actual creation of the company, until 20 years later. You know the one I'm talking about. Would you share that one?
Do I know the one you're talking about?
The water skiing.
Oh.
Rex was out water skiing. They were young. Maybe, I don't even know if they were married yet.
No,
Maybe they were just married or newly, I don't know. But they were out water skiing one day, and I believe they were up in Idaho.
Right.
And Rex is a fairly fair complexioned individual, right? And he got a wicked wicked sunburn. And he woke up the next morning and he's like, oh, I got to get something. And Ruth was talking about, getting lotion on him and just trying to ease the pain and whatever. And it was many years after that when he came across aloe vera, as I recall the story correctly. And he had tried some of this ointment on a burn that he had and realized how it not only soothed the burn, but how quickly it helped soothe it and help heal it. And he says, hey, there's something here. And this is when he was looking for a way to start a company, and he found aloe vera. And it took him back to that day of that sunburn. Of course, what do people use aloe vera for this day and age? More than anything, it seems like, is lathering it on to combat that sunburn. And I thought to myself, that's so precious. That totally makes sense. This guy has built a multi-billion-dollar empire, has helped millions of people around the world, both inside this organization and outside through his philanthropic efforts.
Yeah.
And yet you could probably date it back to that one misadventure water skiing date up in Idaho somewhere when he got burnt to a crisp.
It gave him an acceptance of the product, I guess, many years later.
Yeah, it's always about the moments.
Yeah.
About the moments. Well, what now can anybody get this book? Do you have to be a member of Forever? Can you go online and buy it, or where can they get
Unfortunately, you
access to it?
can't. Yeah, you'd have to go through one of our business owners, or maybe we'll put a link on your site that could maybe email myself or one of the team, and we can
Get
make
them
that happen. Yeah.
Can we pull you select one of the stories, one of your favorite stories out of there? Can we pull it out and feature that on the
Absolutely.
show notes,
Yeah.
so that at least the listeners can get an insight and look at it? Maybe we could include the photography in there, and then the stories themselves, because again, folks, this is, I just think, an expert view of story marketing at its best. The company, there's nothing in here about selling product. There's nothing in here about selling the opportunity. It's about people sharing their real experiences on what this organization has meant to their lives and their families' lives. And again, too, I think you were really smart in this, Nick, is to avoid the rags to riches story. That's not what this is, because the world is full of those. And, it's not even the riches people are about. They first maybe think it's the money I'm going after, but it's the time it buys them to go and travel the world with their family. It's the college education it gets them to raise their kids on. It is that vehicle that they get to drive when before they were on foot or riding the bus. So rags to riches is just a vehicle to get you to somewhere much bigger, more meaningful.
Gives you the ability to make a difference. I think, which is obviously how Rex started this. You touched on the photography, and I think that's a really key part of the book. Obviously, the stories are amazing, but if you've got a visual that of the person, of the hero, the protagonist, if you like, I think it connects everything together. And we spent a long time making sure the photography was right, because we didn't have, or I didn't have the budget to send a single photographer to all of these 40 different locations, 40 different countries to shoot it. But we worked with a very good friend of mine, Xander Yurkovich, who I've known for a number of years. Super talented photographer, and between us we worked out a brief that almost any photographer, a professional photographer, could apply and get a similar look that we could then do a little treatment. But we were keen that the photography, they are portraits, but we didn't want the stand there smiling certificate smile, arms folded look. We wanted to try and really encapsulate some of the personality, encapsulate the story in an image. And that's quite tough to do, but I think we did a pretty good job.
Well, they're beautiful. It's a large book as books go, and the imagery of the people are taking up one full page of a 2-page spread.
Right.
The photography is beautiful. The filters are how you've treated those. How many different photographers did you use to capture these around the world, and then how much work did you have to do to get to them to look consistent?
So it was probably 20 photographers, I'm guessing.
20?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So obviously there's occasions, I think there's a couple of countries that we're able to shoot 2 people in the same country, or maybe they're next door countries, so they were close to use. But we spent a long time selecting the photographers we use, and some of them were through the network that we have within our business, make sure we found somebody appropriate, and then Xander or myself would spend a bunch of time talking to them, actually, laying out what we're looking for, the style. We'd mocked up some styles.
Did you send them some examples?
Exactly, yeah. And we would even quite often be on Skype with them during the shoot, in the middle of the night or whenever it was, and they'd show us some of the preview shots, and maybe we'd give a little bit of subtle direction. But it was very, very important to us that we got that right and tried to encapsulate some of the emotion in a frame.
Yeah. And I think that's the point that sticks out to me in a frame. This photography doesn't look like portrait photography at all, as you pointed out. It looks like you're capturing a moment in these people's lives.
Yeah, and we're really keen to do that. So if we achieve that on some of them, we're happy.
Yeah. Now, if people follow you on Instagram, where can they find you on Instagram?
Nick Woodward-Shaw.
Nick Woodward-Shaw. Now, it's worth going there and checking him out and following him because he does really brilliant photography, especially around entertainment, rock stars, your own daughters in their plays.
Right.
But you've got an eye for it. So you obviously have a passion for photography and capturing those moments, because that's the thing. When I see your photography, it feels more like street photography inside an entertainment environment versus someone who's just shooting a rock store, a rock concert.
That's very nice of you to say so. But that was born out of my kid. You mentioned my kids. They're dancers and actors, and there was always probably 10 years ago back in England, there was always another dad doing the pictures, and he was a cool guy, and they were decent stuff.
And you kept saying, "This is rubbish. I can do better."
A little bit. I was like, well, no, I couldn't do better, but I thought they could be better.
Gotcha.
And I guess again the persistence kicked in. I thought I want better images for the parents or for the kids. So I set about. I had a little interest in photography, but it was like most people, casual, taking snaps. And I kind of got a bit persistent and researched and studied and practiced and failed and practiced some more and failed again and practiced until hopefully I got okay. But it was particularly I love low light. So theater, night photography, concerts.
What is it about low light?
It's the challenge because your camera doesn't like working in low light, and
God, you are persistent.
My wife often wonders about my personality and what's wrong with it. but so it became I couldn't let it win. I wanted to get that great shot of my daughter doing an aerial or that actor on stage. And you're absolutely right. It's those moments. Rock concerts, I guess. Shooting rock concerts, it's two of my passions, photography and music, and I've always loved going to rock concerts. I've attended thousands in my life, so if I'm down the front in the pit or on stage with some artists that I respect, and the connection, the specific connection I love is between the artist and the audience, and if I can capture that and you're looking at a frame that you feel there's a connection there, it's a home run for me, and I'll sleep happy.
Well, isn't that also the kind of the connection you look for when you're trying to connect distributors and prospects to Forever?
Absolutely.
It's the same type of moment, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's something that I think we kind of did anyway. You look for whether it's music or a sentence in a script or a video or a piece of entertainment that engages somebody and maybe just gives them a little butterfly or a little tear to the eye or something. I think we've been doing that for a few years, but almost by accident maybe. And in the last couple of years, I've started to think about that a little bit more. And we now spend significant amount of time trying to design in those moments, not in a forced way, because that would feel wrong to us, but in a natural way. And this certainly happened with this in Dallas when we launched this book. We spent a lot of time trying to tell these stories, but we'd bring out the protagonist, for example, at the end of the story is told to suitable music that would, tug on the heartstrings. And I strongly believe in the more that we work online, the more that we use social media to connect, which is really powerful and really important, and we rely on it a lot as an organization. It's almost more important that the face-to-face, the live environment becomes, because those connections, whether they're personal or with something that's happening on stage, is so, so powerful. And We have a great audience at our events, but we had many people walking away from our event in Texas that said, I've fallen in love with the company again. And to me, that could be my salary.
Just that alone.
Right.
Yeah, having that kind of impact on people.
Right.
You make a really good point there. I hadn't thought about that, but when we think we are so connected online with all these people, because we are social animals, so now we have this virtual social connection that still will never, ever carry the weight of sitting right across from somebody or being in that audience and being moved by something that happens on stage and sharing that collectively. Like tonight, Michelle and I, one of our Friday night things is we go to movies.
Awesome.
And people are like, why do you go to movies? You got that 65-inch Samsung curved screen, blah, blah, blah. I go, yeah, but there's something about sharing that moment in a theater, even if you don't even talk to these people, but laughing at the same time.
Yeah.
That that big screen is never going to replace.
I agree completely.
Yeah. So finally, you've been doing this a long time, and you just are absolutely expert at creating these moments. For our listeners, do you have any advice, 2 or 3 things for them to think about if they want to start creating or anticipating more meaningful moments with their brands, so that people leave with those moments and it becomes a story, and it's a story that they can then share with their world?
I think a couple of things I've learned is, I guess, fairly obvious. Be honest and truthful to yourself and to your brand. It's easy to exaggerate, and it happens a lot, but I believe it shines through and people spot that a mile off. I think the most important thing I've learned, and the thing I think about a lot, is think about when I'm designing an event, I think about the guy that sat in the middle row on his own 6 rows back. I think about how he's feeling, and I try and picture that person in my mind. And it's easy for me maybe to design an event that would suit my boss, and obviously I want to do that as well. I want to keep him happy, but I'm thinking about the anonymous guy that's sat there. How's he feeling? Is he feeling emotional in a positive way, in which case you can drag that out a little bit, but not too much, because then it becomes almost fake. So is the sound too loud? Is it too quiet? Have we played too much rock music? Is the lights too bright? Have we done too much video? I'm constantly thinking about that guy, and that's led me to make a lot of decisions. So I guess from your listener's point of view, think about the audience, whoever that is. It's not necessarily sat in a conference room or a theater, but who are you speaking to? Who's the anonymous person that you don't know yet that's connecting with you? And just try and reinforce that connection, make it super strong.
Yeah, because that anonymous individual is doing you a tremendous favor and are privileging you by them giving you a moment of their time.
Exactly.
So you need to respect that.
Yeah.
And give them good stories.
Give them what they want.
That they can live into and prosper from.
Yeah, exactly.
Nick, thank you so much for being here on Business's Story. It's fun to be back here with you. We're going to be working with some of your leaders coming here in a week or two on storytelling and social media, but how do they keep it real? And I'm really, really looking forward to that. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you all for listening to this edition of the Business of Story. If you liked what you heard today and you like this concept of moments, share this show with someone you know, a colleague, a friend, a family. Push it out in the world so that they can get better too at understanding how to design and anticipate these moments, because truly it is the moments that you create in other people's lives that spark the stories that they will tell about you and your brand. So make them special, make them honest, be authentic about it, and have fun. Above all, have fun, and I think that's the thing that you did really, really well with the 40 Stories of Forever book. So, and until next week, when we will have another amazing story artist on like Nick, please visit me at businessofstory.com, where I can help you with tools and tips and techniques that you can download for free. And of course, remember, the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thank you for listening.